a lot of people that their method of interaction is not necessarily what other people think it should be. And so, they just took it to a way far level. So he was slammed into the ground. He injured his neck. So he filed for workers' compensation, and Koch said, why would we give you workers' compensation? You weren't at work. And so because he was at a work event, he was injured while engaging in conduct with the knowledge and consent of the employer. So do you think that Coca-Cola acted ethically in denying him his workers' compensation? No, absolutely not. So this was a work sanctioned event. This was something that they were promoting, and probably most likely there was some sort of expectation for them to attend. What is the public policy that underlies? Oh, okay. We won't go there. Okay. So yeah, so this is, he should have the workers' compensation benefits. That was something that, even though it wasn't on his work premises, it still happened as a result of a work sanctioned event. So there is liability from a business standpoint. There is liability outside of work, depending on the circumstances, and if it's something that you are sanctioning as a business. So keep that in mind for businesses.
You almost don't want to create a permission slip when you own a business that,
please sign here. Sign.
You are responsible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And, and it's just a situation that's evolved over time, because something's happened and people have gotten to a point where they're like, okay, well, somebody's got to be responsible for this. So, so how many of you have heard of OSHA, or the Occupational Safety and Health Act, or Health Administration? Blah, blah. So that is an agency that was established to help regulate these types of dangerous situations, or safety in the workplace. So that's what it's there for. The bridge construction that I mentioned earlier definitely had OSHA oversight. OSHA was there a lot. The dam didn't, because OSHA didn't establish until 1970. So in the 1970s, when OSHA established, the dam was already 40 years old. But did the dam play a part in OSHA being established? Most likely. I mean, all of those things leading up to that, with so many deaths with these dangerous jobs and everything, it just, the government said, look, we've got to do something. We've got to get regulation on this. So I used to work for a company who we performed a lot of dangerous jobs. Not necessarily me. Mine would have been like a paper cut would have been dangerous, but but other people in my office performed some dangerous jobs. One of those being that they climbed towers. Another being that dealing with explosives, and there were other things that weren't as dangerous, and those things were still regulated, like driving the company vehicle. I guess that's kind of dangerous. It was quite dangerous, actually, but but that was also regulated. Driving a forklift, that was regulated. Even the chair that I used daily, because I was in an office and I actually sat for hours upon hours every day, the chair was regulated. I had to purchase a chair that was graded for sitting long periods of time, and I had to set up my workstation in a manner where I was not causing strain. It was pretty insane. This all came from OSHA. All of this stuff came from our safety and our safety people, and they were following OSHA standards. So there was a lot of crazy stuff that we had to do in order to comply. Not crazy, but safety stuff that we had to do to comply with that. And sometimes it got really crazy. Like if anything happened, any little problem happened, automatically we were drug tested. So a coworker of mine, she went into the restroom and there was a drain on the floor that was kind of concave. So if you stepped on it wrong, it was not good. And she stepped on it wrong and fell, lost her balance and fell. And she actually had to be checked out at a hospital and drug tested. And then she had to actually take training after that about how to wear proper shoes and watch out for hazards and basically walk properly, whatever. So it may be extreme, but the work that we did and the regulatory agencies that we had to comply with required this type of extreme environment where we were very hyper aware of all of the things that could possibly go wrong.
What kind of company was it?
We were a government contractor.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so we were governed by the government. and all of the other little things. So yeah, we had a lot of reporting that we had to do. We had a lot of hoops that we had to jump through all the time. And the company took it very, very seriously. So, but that's the only way you can do it when you work for a company like that. You have to take everything so to the extreme, basically, for seriousness. So the government has enacted acts that protect workers. The Fair Labor Standards Act, or the FLSA, and the Family and Medical Leave Act, or the FMLA, which you guys may have heard of, are two of these protections. The FLSA governs things like minimum wage and overtime pay. So many of you probably know that Flagstaff approved a minimum wage of $15 an hour. So now if you live in Flagstaff, the minimum wage is $15 an hour. However, if you go to Williams, which isn't far from Flagstaff, the minimum wage is 12 something. I don't remember, 12.49 or something like that. So, so the state is trying to regulate that somewhat, and they're trying to make the $15 an hour a statewide, and actually at the federal, it's at the federal level as well. But how many of you know how overtime works? Okay. So basically, if you work over 40 hours a week, yeah, and overtime could be very awesome, and it can also really suck. So, but if you work over 40 hours a week, you would get paid time and a half. So, so if you worked 50 hours, you would get time and a half for 10 hours of pay. And so that can really make your pay go up pretty quick if you are working a lot of overtime. However, if you're working a lot of overtime, you're probably very tired and don't want to work anymore, right? So there are drawbacks, of course, but that's part of what the Fair Labor Standards Act regulates, is overtime and how that works and all of that. Let's look at.
Is it the same in every state? Like 40 to 48 is time and a half, 48 to 56 is double time? Or does it depend on the company?
No, that should be a federal level. It's at federal level. So I guess some states may have a little bit of a different situation, but from what I know, it's federal, that anything over 40 hours. Now, there are a few exceptions to that, and that would be if you are salary. You don't get, if you're an exempt employee or a salary employee or something like that, you don't get overtime. You work for that amount of pay for that amount of time. And some companies will actually do some sort of compensation for that, like they'll allow comp time or something like that, that will give you some sort of benefit for working more than your 40 hours. Also, if you have a flexed or a weird work schedule. So what you're saying, Rihanna, you said something about 48 hours or something?
Yeah, for us, it's I didn't know if it was like everybody does it, but 40 to 48 hours is time and a half, and then 48 to 56 is double time.
Okay.
And after 56 goes back to time and a half.
So not everybody does it, but what's happening in your company is they've taken it upon themselves to do more. And you can always do more than the federal regulation. So you can always do better. But not everyone does that. And generally it's just time and a half. They probably have that set up because if you're working over that amount of time, then there's probably something going on to where they feel like you deserve that double time. There are these highly dangerous jobs. Those types of things too can be paid at a different rate. We had what we called high time pay. So if our guys were climbing towers, they got paid a different rate than their normal 40-hour rate for however long they were climbing. So and they're gone for they go climb the tower and they're up there for an hour or whatever. So they get the high time pay as well for their time for going to the tower and climbing the tower and doing all the things that they were doing. So that was a high time pay. We had a couple other things that we used for pay as well. It was like the we had some on-call pay to where if you were on call, you would get paid an additional amount. And if you were doing certain projects, you might get paid a little differently based on the project. That's kind of along the lines of a dangerous position where they're going to pay you more for doing a dangerous position or whatever. So there are other types of stipulations that you can do, but no, Rihanna, that's not a normal thing. So that's just something that your company is doing that's above and beyond the federal regulation. Let's take a look at case 35.2. Let's see. Yeah, we'll do that real quick. So 35.2, this is talking about the Fair Labor Standards Act. It's IBP Inc. versus Alvarez. And in my book, it's on page 665. And Vanessa just posted that at 633. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes for that.
I think IBP was trying to take advantage of its employees.
Yeah, most likely, right? I mean, it's pretty crazy. And this one probably was one of the reasons that they started regulating or getting more specific about if an employee is at the workplace and if you've required specific things from them. So if you require your workers to get dressed at work, then they should be paid for getting dressed at work, right? So there are certain things like that that do come up. So so child labor is another thing that's covered under the FLSA. Children have to be at least 14 to work, and even then it's with restrictions, unless they're doing a newspaper route. So if they're doing the newspaper route, they can be whatever age. But if they're under 14, they can only work specific hours. They can't work in dangerous jobs. They are pretty restricted. Once they hit 16, the restrictions start to lift a little. And then once they're 18, obviously they're good to go. So we talked a little bit about FMLA. So FMLA, the Family and Medical Leave Act, is basically if you were out of work for a period of time, the most common thing that people think of when they think of this is for maternity leave, right? So if you have a baby and you go on maternity leave, or if your significant other has a baby and goes on maternity leave and you go on maternity leave as well. Basically what that does, what FMLA does for you, is it secures your job. So if you are out for some medical or family related situation, the employer can't just get rid of your job. It has to be there when you come back. Now, it is possible that the job that you were doing was so essential that they had to hire someone else. And in that case, when you come back, there has to be a job that is of equal consideration waiting for you. So it has to be, if it's not your exact position, then it has to be something of equal value. Excuse me. What was that, Rihanna?
They have what is it, sickness and accident leave too?
Yeah. And so those types of situations, so if it's a medical situation, funerals, going to a funeral, there was a time when some of the companies, if you called in and said, hey, so and so died, I gotta go, kind of thing, they would be like, see ya, and you quit. So you're fired, so don't come back, kind of thing. So that's what they're stemming all of this off of. Or these people, these ladies would go out and have their babies and come back, and there's nothing for them. There's no work for them. They no longer have a job and no way to support their child that they just had, right? So there were situations where that would happen. So the government stepped in and said, let's get this Family and Medical Leave Act together and think about, if you're a mom and you have to care for your children, if you have to do that, kids get sick, it happens, right? So if you have to do that, they can't just fire you because you called in sick because your kid's sick, those kinds of things. So if you get hospitalized, I was actually hospitalized one time for a week, and while I was gone, a lot of things were happening at my work, and I worked for a good company, so they would have never gotten rid of me during that time, but that's what it protects for. They did try calling me and having me work from the hospital bed, but so that's what happens, I guess. So when they value you, I guess, I don't know. But anyway, so we had to have words about how, no, I couldn't talk on medication like that. So yeah, so these types of things happen, and businesses need to be there for you, and they need to take care of you while you're gone. And so those are some of the things that they do. So these things are not as common anymore, but unions used to be huge, and they still do exist, but they're not as big as they used to be. But a union basically, and that probably because the government has stepped in and done so many regulatory agencies for employment, that labor unions are not necessarily needed as much as they used to be. So that's a very, very possible situation. But a lot of jobs, there are still quite a few jobs out there that or employers out there that have unions, and the reason is because the unions actually are the employees form like an association, and they are part of this union, and then this union is an entity basically that negotiates with the employer. So the voice of the people, right? So they negotiate terms of wages, hours, and other conditions of employment. So if the negotiations get sticky, the employees can strike and they can picket. So you may have seen this. I saw it quite a bit when I was in Vegas. A lot of the casinos get that people outside picketing and striking. And we saw it not too long ago here in Page. I'm not sure if Flagstaff was doing it too, but the teachers were picketing and striking. They were on strike. They basically were not happy with the situation, and they said, no, you know what, we're not coming back until you guys fix this. So they were on strike, and strikes done, they have to be done, strikes and pickets both have to be done within certain parameters. You have to follow the legalities of strikes and pickets, and if you go outside of those, they're considered illegal, and you can be arrested, and you can get in a lot of trouble. So that's basically unions. Sometimes a company will want to employ foreign guests. That happens quite a bit, actually. And these workers would need a visa. And I'm not talking about the credit card here. I'm talking about an actual visa that is given to you when you go to another country. So I don't know how many of you have been out of the country and if you had to do a visa or not. Some countries require them and some don't, just for travel, just for vacation, just for whatever. Some of them require if you stay for a period of time. Some of them require if you enter at all. Some of them are work visas specifically, and that's what an employee would need in order to work in the United States, if a foreign guest would need. So they would need their visa that basically would be an endorsement for them to enter, leave, and stay in the country. And with the work visa, it actually specifies work conditions. So basically it says that you can come to this country, you can work for 2 years, and then you have to go back home, or whatever it might be. So there are stipulations in those. So
union, I know for our work, there's like, well, I mean, not here in Flag, but other companies in other states, they have like certain departments that are only union, like
yes,
the quality department's only union, but then you have the production side that's not union. So
yeah, and that's possible too. And that it's just gonna differ in a lot of ways. And I can tell you, I've never been part of a union, and so I don't know as much about them and I've never had to deal too much with a union, so I don't know as much about them as some other people might. But they do still exist. They are still out there, and they are. You're right. Different departments can have unions, and it's just based on. So you said production does or does not.
I believe it doesn't. Their quality and warehouse departments are union, but their production isn't.
Okay, and see that I don't know why production wouldn't be, because you would think that production would want to get in on that, but maybe their production area is actually paid at a good rate and all that. But unions are usually formed to make sure that those gripes I don't want to say gripes, those requirements of the employees are taken care of. And if you make a bigger voice, so that's what the union's for, it's making that bigger voice. So if I went to someone and I said, I don't think you're paying me what I'm worth, I think you need to pay me more money. And, you know, I mean, that could be a valid argument. It could be a situation where I could do that. But let's say that I'm doing that, but everybody is not, everybody on my floor or everybody in my division or whatever is not being paid the correct amount. And so we all get together and we talk about it and we go, okay, you know what? Let's get this together and let's all of us go and say, or the representatives of the union actually go. So it's not everyone, but go and talk to them and negotiate and get the rates that we should have.
You
I
also
don't-
pay the union, so a portion of your check goes to the union, whoever's. So.
Yeah, so you would opt into the union. And like I say, I don't know tons about unions, but you opt into the union and generally there's a fee. So it's just like any other association. If you're a part of that association, you pay for it somehow, generally. So that's the kind of thing that you would do. But you also have protections of this company. You have, or this entity. So these unions are actually protecting you as well. And you know, they're working hard to make sure that you have what you need. So they can be really good, but they can also get in the way. So it just depends on how they're handled and what they're fighting for and all of that. So let's take a look at the assignment and then we'll talk about chapter 36. So the assignment that's due next week, this is the last one, by the way, it's assignment number 5. Woohoo! So we're almost there, guys. So it is 35.2 for most of you. Gosh, I'm sorry. 35.4 if you have my book. And it's on page 677 in my book, and it looks like 645 in your book. So this one, and it's 35.4. So this is the Getty Oil one, Getty Oil Company. Everybody see that? So Getty operates a separation facility where it gathers gas and oil from wells and transmits them to outgoing pipelines under high pressure. Getty engineers designed and produced a pressure vessel called a fluid booster, which was to be installed and increase pressure in the system. Robinson, a Getty engineer, was instructed to install the vessel. Robinson picked up the vessel from the welding shop without having it tested. After he completed the installation, the pressure valve was put into operation. When it increased, it exploded. So anyway, this is your case that you're going to be dealing with, the last case that you have to do. That is in Canvas and it's due next week before class. So, all right, let's talk about the last chapter and we're going to make this one quick. So this one's equal opportunity in employment. So in 1964, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act was enacted, and it deals with discrimination issues. So Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 makes illegal job description based on the following protected classes: color, national origin, sex, and religion. Section 703A2 of Title VII as amended provides in pertinent part that it shall be unlawful employment practice for an employer to fail or refuse to hire or to discharge any individual or otherwise to discriminate against any individual with respect to his compensation, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment because of such individual's race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, or to limit, segregate, or classify his employees, or applicants for employment in any way which would deprive or tend to deprive any individual of employment opportunities or otherwise adversely affect his status as an employee because of such individual's race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. So I'm sure most of you, if you've ever applied for a job, have seen something about this. Most likely on the application, it says that they are an equal opportunity employer, or an EO, it's either an EOE or an EOC, which is equal opportunity employer, or an equal opportunity company, but they, or corporation, but they, those types of things are talking about this and how you cannot discriminate. And I can tell you, I don't know how many of you have been in a position where you were hiring or firing people, but I have. And I can tell you right off that there are a lot of stipulations on how to conduct the interview, what you can and can't say, you know, what reasons you can fire someone, all these different things. So there's a lot of stipulations out there that are meant to protect people. So that's what Title VII is dealing with, and the Civil Rights Act. And it's a violation of Title VII to discriminate against a person's race, color, or national origin. Discrimination of gender or sexual harassment are also violations of Title VII. Discrimination on people based on their sex was a huge issue as women started entering the workforce, and some were very resistant to that. On both sides, men were resistant to women entering, and women were resistant to women entering the workforce. It seems that every other day we're hearing about a sexual harassment case. They're all over the TV right now. So harassment of any kind, it doesn't have to be sexual, but it can create a hostile work environment for an employee. And we're not going to go through this, but I want to just point out that on there is a critical thinking case called, and it says Pennsylvania State Police versus Sutters. And this is on page 688 in my book. This one talks a little bit more about sexual harassment. So if you get a chance to read that, that'd probably be good, but I'm not going to go into it today because we're running out of time. But another protection provided by Title VII is age. 656, thank you. Age is a huge issue for some, or was a huge issue for some people. You know, a lot of people were like, well, I want someone young. I don't want to have someone older because they're slower, or because they do this or do that. And it's a violation for them to discriminate. So if that older person has the exact same qualifications as that younger person, and they choose to hire that younger person over the older person, and that older person finds out, there could possibly be a lawsuit. And depending on how substantiated those claims are, it could become an issue for the company. There is another one that we need to talk about really quick, and that's the Americans with Disabilities Act. And if you look at, there's a little box, this is toward the end of the chapter, I guess. It is, it says landmark law, and it says Americans with Disabilities Act. And in my book, it starts on page 692. Is that 660? Okay. And then, so basically it's talking about how you cannot discriminate if a person has a disability. So there are some reasons that you would not need to make accommodations for a disabled person as a business, and that is if it causes an undue hardship on the business. And that's pretty much the only thing that you can, that you would be able to claim as a response for not hiring disabled. So, so there's something you have to think about as well when you're in a hiring type of situation, or when you run your business. Okay, so I kind of went fast with that. Next week, we are going to go over chapters 37 through 39. This will be the last lecture. The last two chapters of the book, parts 9 and 10, I'm not going to, they're recommended that you read them and go through them, but I'm not going to lecture on them, and they will not be in the exam. We do have an exam the week after next. So next week we will discuss these chapters, and then we'll talk about that exam. That will be our last exam, and then other than the final. And remember, I said that those 3 exams, I would take questions from those in order to make up your final exam. So it shouldn't be any new information in that final exam. It should be something that's just basically a review. But we'll kind of go over a few things, probably the class before the final exam. And then don't forget the assignment 5 that we just talked about is due next week. So that's all I have for you guys tonight. So if you don't have any questions, you can go.
Thank you, Cindy. Have a good night.